You have a new record that's going to be coming out in March. End of March, it's coming out. You were touring very heavily with the first solo record. You finished up in the UK as part of the Persistence tour at the end of January, right before COVID shut everything down. Kind of initial question is, did you have plans already in place to continue touring past that with the first record, or were you starting to get ready to let's get some more material put together for the BillyBio project?
Yeah, that actually, I'll never forget that show. That was obviously the last tour that we did. It was on a Sunday. Yeah, played in London. It was the day that Kobe Bryant. But and we all went home sick. My drummer was the worst. I was sick for like a month, maybe 3 weeks, and then the world started to shut down. We played one show in downtown LA with Power Flow the night before the LA shut down. But that was supposed to be the end. I was working on. I was going to plan on working on new BillyBio at the time, and then everything went to shit. So it seemed to fall in place at the right time.
Go on, sorry.
Well, they say there's always a silver lining,
Yeah, yeah. The silver lining for a lot of musicians and bands is that it's given some time to be able to concentrate on new material, and without kind of rushing to get it out, because there was no touring available, obviously, the last couple of years. So I think a lot of bands have taken that time to really try and iron out the creases and put out as solid a work as they can without maybe overdoing it, I suppose. Did you find that was that a benefit when you were putting together this new record?
No, because I've never been goal oriented as far as worrying about time constraints and schedules and release dates. When it's done, it's done. I'm always creating, and it's like when there's a group of songs, it seems that the album writes itself. They seem to all magnetize together, and it becomes Leaders and Liars, for example. But I don't sit down worrying about any of that stuff. I just let the shit kind of just come out of me organically and naturally. And it's helped me stay focused on all the real part that matters the most, because without truly and honestly expressing yourself, it's all a waste of time anyways, because if people, we're all fans of music, and the stuff that's created from the heart and soul, and the shit that's created just to pay your bills. So
with regard to, obviously, you doing your solo material and you acting as your own, you write everything for yourself, and you've not really got the other people to bounce ideas off like you would have had previously with Biohazard and Powerflow, for example. Do you find that is something that you enjoy, basically being your own boss and just having this is what I'm writing, and I actually don't, although you want it to be, obviously you do it for yourself, you want to meet your expectations, but not having the potential noise in the background of other people? Or do you really enjoy having that working with other musicians, or is it just a mixture of the two, really?
I think there's an attraction to both. I'll always be thankful for my time with guys in Biohazard, their friends and their family. And I love and respect and am proud of what I've created with Biohazard. But I kind of look at it, Dan, like I always was a solo artist, like I always had the ability to record. Well, as soon as I was able to have the ability to record and take my ideas out and put them on back in the old days, it was a cassette tape demo. But I would bring those ideas into Biohazard that way. I still have old tapes of like songs like Business or Urban Discipline, even a videotape of me writing like What Makes Us Tick. But what is different is like having, not to put myself on the same, in the same level as Picasso or Monet or any other awesome, amazing artist, but they don't create something and invite their friends over for a beer and hand them the paintbrush and say, go ahead, change what you want to change.
Yeah.
Their vision stays pure to them. And I think that's what they're most known for, is it's a true representation of what's inside of them. Doing my music like this, I don't, as much as respect I have for what I've done and will do with Biohazard, because it's not over. It's not over till I'm dead and gone. But I like having the ability to like take a cable and plug it into my heart and soul, and let you share with people who want to hear what I have to say, without having it be tainted.
I mean, you've obviously mentioned that you bring it, that obviously previously you've brought in your ideas to obviously discuss with other band members. Has anything about your writing changed at all? I mean, there's going to be gradual progression from obviously as you're younger, as gaining experience.
Yeah, less stress.
Do you find it as is there less stress for you doing it as you've obviously continued to do it? With you saying that, do you not find it as stressful as it may have been previously, many years ago?
Well, I'm a firm believer that the best art comes from conflict, and when you're in a band situation, there's like this democratic way that doesn't really work. Because if you have two ideas that are extreme, fight to die, fight to the death for your idea to be heard, because a compromise somewhere in the middle is neither of the great ideas, of the extreme ideas, whether I agree with the idea or not. And being so idea oriented, and my creativity is a lot of times overwhelming for other people, and not having that stress over deciding which is a better of the ideas. And a lot of times those decisions were left to a producer, because I'm so passionate about my idea, and somebody else in the band maybe has another idea only because they just want to come contradict my idea, or maybe stroke their ego a little bit because they didn't have an idea. So I always kind of looked at that as somebody throwing their 2 cents in, but not to take anything away from what we called with Biohazard. It was a biohazard meat grinder. There's a certain power and a certain energy. Biohazard is what it is, and we created what we created as a result of the 4 of us working together. And even though at times that was stressful, I think that's a good thing. The best shit comes out of conflict. So the advantage of me being solo, I don't have, it's ballsy because I don't have anybody to bounce my ideas off. So it's not like I can, but I think it's a more honest representation of who I am as a person and an artist,
You mentioned obviously producers being involved in that. Now you've produced this album, you produced the last one. I believe some of the later Biohazard albums you handled the production on as well as you working with other bands. Do you find it, is there any difference in how you approach it, with it being your own work? Do you find it more difficult? Do you find it easier to just be able to do your work on it and know when you've got to that finished point with it, when you're doing all that yourself?
Yeah, with the solo stuff and even Power Flow, because it's basically like I do everything at my studio. So I write everything, and Power Flow we put together. It was basically Sen and he would get together, even though Roy was involved at the beginning. Christian came in after the record was written, but it's basically getting together after Sunday football, and he'd bring a bunch of friends over, a bunch of beer, and he'd smoke a bunch of weed, and we'd work on music. But I lost track of the question, but I think maybe it's just like everything. I think there's a saying, a poor craftsman blames his tools, but my experience has given me the tools to be able to easily express what I have in my head and in my heart and soul. Having my own studio is helpful. Having the technical know-how to achieve those visions is obviously helpful. I don't have to rely on someone else. But I think if and when there will be another Biohazard record, I would look forward to working with another producer because I loved, I wouldn't rattle the cage so much the way we work together, you know?
Okay.
I still bring in songs like I always have and even more so now. It's my demos are more like, you know, they sound better than the first few Biohazard records. But it's intimidating for some people. As a producer, I look at the bands I work with and it's like my own music. My name goes on your record. So I treat it like it's a Biohazard record or a BillyBio or a Powerflow record. I'm not going to settle for mediocrity. It has to be fucking great. I don't care about egos. If somebody has an idea that I think is great and somebody else has an idea that they think is great, I'm going to make my decision based on what's best in the song. And the end result is what matters.
Yeah. Feelings,
you get over that. You can put a Band-Aid on your bruised ego. What lasts is that purity, that power. That's the most impactful thing an artist can do.
Cool, thank you. I wanted to ask some questions about the new record. One thing that's kind of struck me as a listener of as the first solo record and this new one is that you kind of encapsulate various different styles of hardcore and punk and bring it onto one record, where you've got certain bands who have you've got sounds that, you know, change throughout their record back catalogue. I mean, if you'd listen to Agnostic Front, for example, Victim in Pain doesn't sound like Something's Gotta Give, which doesn't sound like one voice. But each individual record has a sound that's quite consistent. Whereas I always find with these two solo records that you've got a bit of everything bought into that. Was that something you intentionally wanted to achieve, that you didn't just have a line in the sand that says, this record needs to sound like this, that you had all these things brought in to be able to, you know, showcase what the entire style does basically on one single piece of music, basically over a full record?
Yeah, I don't sit down, like I said before, I don't sit down with a goal of having things sound a certain way. I just write, and then when there's a collection of songs, like having a collection of songs, Dan, is not even my goal. It's just like I focus on the one thing that I have at hand. And I have a Patreon that I released a series of the evolution of a song that I didn't know was going to be on the record. I just kept writing, and I just would put my iPhone down and I'd press record, and I'd capture like an hour of me playing acoustic guitar. And I did a bunch of those over like 6 or 7 things, and I released on my Patreon, but I put it up recently as like a 3-minute edited version. And it shows the birth of an idea and the progression of that becoming a full-fledged song that ends up being the first single on the record in a video. I ended up working with Toby Morris from H2O on the song. It's called One Life to Live. Did this really awesome one camera shot of a video right during the height of the pandemic. But it shows the progression and how I write. And even though there's no concrete formula, that kind of shows like a really behind the scenes in-depth look at how I like to work. So I don't have an intention. The one thing that I did set out to do with BillyBio was I wanted to work with a different mixer. And I worked solely with Tui Matson. He mixed the first record, he mixed this record. And for the first time in my career, I always look at it like this. There's the vision that you have in your head. Then there's the actual record that you make. And then when you're done, 2-3 months later, you look back and you say things like, I wish I would have done this different. Every record was like that for my career, until the solo records. And even more so now, I didn't work on Leaders and Liars with the intent of outdoing what I did on Feed the Fire, the first solo record. But working with Tui, he helps keep the vision, the fact, and the after thought all the same. And it's the first time in my career I was able to do that. It took me God knows how many years to get there, but it was always like, I always I I remember this when Suicidal Tendency recorded the first record. A lot of people didn't like it, but there's a certain quality in that rawness of the first record. But there was a certain, the sonics of the record weren't that great. When they redid it, they added leads and they played it much better, but the sound was fucking amazing. If you could put the two together, to me, it was perfect. We always fell short. I always, in my opinion, I personally felt like we always fell short of the power and the message. They never really hit. And now I'm able to make it hit and make it work. And I couldn't be more happier and proud of something that I made with the help of Tui.
With regard to obviously other members who play on this record, on the first record, did you record everything bar the drums yourself, and then have other people come in for the live shows, or was it still the same the same studio lineup that you've used on this new record? Because you've mentioned you've obviously got is it Fred who plays drums for Power Flow, drumming on it? You have is it Ra Diaz from Suicidal on bass, and Dan Palmer and Robbie Davidson playing leads on the record? Was it is that new for this record, or were members of that also involved in the first record as well?
A little bit of both. So the first drummer, to start from the top, when I write, and that video I was talking about before, it kind of shows how I write. I play drums. Sometimes I go in, I play a little bit of drums, but a lot of times my music, it's all about the vibe and the emotion and the feeling. So on that particular song, One Life to Live, it shows progression. Once I have the music together, then I work on some drums. So sometimes I use a drum machine.
Yeah.
Sometimes I go in the other room and play drums. And then once it's there, then that gives me the vibe to work on the lyrics and the words and the melodies. And I work on that. Then I bring everybody else in. So the first record with my buddy Simo Perini, he's from Italy. He moved away, played on the first record, and he was on tour with 10 Foot Pole and a few other bands and couldn't tour. So Fred joined on tour. Actually, I had another buddy of mine play for a bit, but when Fred came in, he was my drummer. He's rock solid. So once I have the songs down, I bring everybody else in. I think that I have I give a little bit more freedom to for Dan and Robbie and Ra than I do on Fred, because the drums I labor extensively. It's all about the feeling. So I spend a lot of time working that. I'm open for ideas, but again, it's not a band. It's a band, but as a writer, I like my painting to really be what I see in my head.
Yeah.
You know?
You want your vision to come out on the canvas, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not to take anything away, because one of the things is, I play with such talented musicians that they make my, punk rock and hardcore skill look a little bit better. Because to me, it's more about the emotion. It's more about how you play it than how perfectly you play it.
Yeah.
And it's not about being perfectly key. It's not about being perfectly played. And I get that. I like a lot of bands that are exceptionally precise and meticulous. So many bands are like that. But it's a common theme. Biohazard was like that too. We didn't over scrutinize things. We didn't edit drums. We didn't sample the drums. We didn't edit the guitars. You played it. If you couldn't play it right, well, that's the way it is. A lot of tricks and smokes and mirrors that you can do these days. You can just play a section over and over again until it's perfect, and then you copy it.
Yeah.
And some of the greatest music has been made like that, from Fear Factory to Ministry. It's just not my thing. I prefer the perfection and the imperfection.
Yeah. Okay. You want that feeling to come out through your playing that you can't replicate by essentially copying and pasting something and having it sound too perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Leave a mistake.
Yeah.
Life is not perfect.
No,
it's
I get
filled with little odd, weird things that don't work, but they work.
Yeah, they work when you put them all together and see the final, the big picture kind of thing from what those mistakes have helped create, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about playing live. So you've got a lot of energy, we'll put it like that. You've obviously played small, you've played small bar venues, you've played the biggest metal festivals in the world. When you're in that smaller environment, you've got the crowd right in front of your face, you've obviously got the energy that you can pass on to them, and then vice versa. When you're playing, like for example, Dynamo in 95 or Darrington in 94, you've got a 10-foot gap between you and the crowd. Do you have to prepare in a different way to approach that kind of situation to make sure that the people who are there aren't being shortchanged based on how a performance would be in a more intimate kind of setting?
Yeah, well, we witnessed that when we played Donington, and they underestimated the power of the punters that came barreling over the barricade.
Yeah.
They shut us down and kicked us off stage. So, but it's the same. I'll play your backyard, Dan, and you're going to see the same power, the same passion and energy and angst that I have on stage in front of, 2,000 people or 20,000 people. It's the same. I think every artist who's truthful and honest performs the same way. I remember being on tour once in this new band. I'm not going to say their name because if you don't have nothing nice to say about somebody, just keep your mouth shut, I believe. But they were an LA band. They were supposed to be this new thing that mixed punk rock and metal, a new thing. But they went on stage, and I was like, wow, these guys are fucking awesome. The singer was fucking amazing. He comes off, he goes to the side of the stage, he stands next to me, gives me a head nod. He grabs a bottle of Jack Daniels, and he grabs the bottle, and the crowd is on his left, and he starts downing this bottle of Jack Daniels. And the crowd's like, yeah, and he fucking takes it, smashes it. But what I saw was he poured it down from this side. He was holding the bottle here, and the fucking Jack Daniels, which was probably Coca-Cola, just poured on the fucking ground all over his shoulder. But to the audience perspective, cloak and dagger, smoke and mirrors. When it's real, we know it's real.
Yeah.
Not to take anything away, but a lot of people, bands hide behind masks.
Yeah.
Except for Slipknot. They're fucking real. Those dudes, they're the same dudes without the masks.
Yeah.
And the masks are changing. They just make it cooler to look at.
I get you. Couple more questions. You've mentioned obviously you've got a Patreon, which you promote heavily on social media. Basically, can you tell us a bit more about that? What kind of content's pushed out, and where people can find it?
So it's funny. It's weird. It just hit me weird when you said you promote a lot of that on social media. I guess I do, but it's not a money. I never was about that. Like when I first heard about Patreon, I was like, fuck that shit. I looked at it like a money grab, like it was a way for bands to make money off their fans. I never looked at the people who support me as fans, because if I didn't have that support, I wouldn't be able to do and make music and be able to tour around the world and share what I create. But it was a friend of mine. I was doing a podcast with a buddy of mine, and the subject came up about it. And I was like, nah, I'm not into that. I don't do the meet and greets. I like to go out, after the show, I'll go hang out to the merch booths and shake people's hands and have them, we share stories. They tell me about the first time they met me, or I tell them about something. They ask me about a song. But it takes a lot of time, and I love doing it, and I'll never stop doing it. And I have no intention of charging people for that attention, but it's constantly a lot of this. And everybody that I want to talk to deserves my attention, and I want to give them that attention. But often I'm interrupted in the middle of a sentence because someone else, rightfully so, deserves my attention. That's what I'm there for. So I get stories that are interrupted. Patreon gives me a chance to have one-on-one, to share a side of the creativity of me as an artist, as a person, that I can't do in any other way. So I have a bunch of things that I do, different, there's different memberships, but it's everything from, I have a series called Tales from the Hard Side, where basically it was a book that I was writing of all my experiences and funny stories from touring with Metallica to Slayer, Pantera. There are so many stories about Pantera, Fishbone, how we got on tour with Metallica because I almost got in a fight with Lars Ulrich. All these different stories that I was writing, you know, the rock and roll stories to the funny stories. But I started to do a video series called Tales from the Hard Side, which is like a book, like a visual stories, and it's more animated. So when you write a story, people write books, a lot of times they're very well organized. They have cue cards, and they spend months and months organizing these stories into chapters. And there's an editor, and there's a co-writer or a ghostwriter. But these stories are like, you know, little episodes. I'm into the 50s and 60s now, but it's all, each one, you know, like I go off on tangents. Like I'll tell a story about the time we were on tour with Slayer, and I got a fight with somebody on the tour bus. I threw a beer bottle, it smashed. And then, on that same tour, we were with Cradle of Filth, and this happened. So like the stories take twists and turns that in a book form, they're more organized. So it's more interesting. It's a different twist. The other thing is like sharing things like, you know, a lot of my patrons were, you know, very, I wouldn't say influential, but they were in on like decisions like, oh, these are the titles of the record that I'm thinking about. These are some songs. This is a video that I'm working on. What do you think? Shit like that. I share a lot of the creativity that usually is left behind the scenes and left to private. And that I like. I think that it's another way for an artist to share creativity that's not so commercialized. It's more personal. It's like a digital fan club.
Yeah.
But that aside, it's BillyBio has it on Patreon. It's all about, at this point, you know, it's Leaders and Liars is almost like the baby that I've been working on for such a long time. It's finally can stand on its own, and that's what I enjoy talking about. And for people to, till I'm dead, bro, I'll always be thankful and amazed that people like yourself take the time to talk to me about something that is so precious to me. It's like a baby. It's like a kid. You know, we give birth to these things. It's a part of us. It's an extension of us. And then they take on a life of its own, and people get different things from it. People come up to me and talk to me about previous records and say, oh, this record came out and it helped me through a part of my life for this reason or that. It's powerful. You know, the fame and fortune covers of magazines or gold records, that shit is irrelevant. When somebody really gets what you do and it touches them in a way, just like all the music that I love, I take that with me with pride and power that goes with me to the grave. And the bands that I love, like I see the collection behind you, that music that we all love is a part of us. And there's a connection that we have with the artists that make that music. That's a powerful connection. So that I'm thankful and humbled to keep that with a lot of respect.
Cool. I mean, last question really is, obviously the album's out 25th of March. It's called Leaders and Liars, as you mentioned. There's a couple of tracks on Spotify already. Where can people find and purchase the rest of the album from, please?
Everything is Billy Biohazard. I'm on social media, Billy Biohazard. You know, Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer. It's everywhere. We have two songs out. The first one, which is a video I did for a song called One Life to Live with Toby from H2O. The second single I did, and I just released that video last week. Well, sorry, I've had COVID for 10 days. So it's 2 weeks ago. That's called Turn the Wounds. Another video I directed that is fucking probably the coolest thing I ever created. I love the first one, One Life to Live. It's like a one camera shot right at the height of the pandemic. All of Los Angeles, pretty much the whole world was shut down with Omicron. And then I'm working on a new video, and we finish filming that tomorrow for a new song called Blackout. And that'll be out.
Is that the first track on the open track on the album? Yeah.
Yep. Opening track.
Cool. No, brilliant. Billy, appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll see you in the UK at some point.
You will, Dan.
Months. Cool. Look forward to it.
Looking forward to coming back. Thanks for your time, bro. Safe.
No problem. You too.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you keep up to date with future episodes by subscribing to our channels. For more information on this podcast, or for all the latest music news, reviews, interviews and more, head over to our website, www.therazorsedge.rocks.